Hi, I'm Kent Lind. Welcome to another edition of Airbrush Action Instructional Videos. Today we're going to be going over the first part of a two-part series that I like to call Kent Lind's Top 25 Designs. In essence, these are designs that I've come up with over the past 10 to 15 years that I consider my best sellers. Let's get going. The first design and the first set of designs that I'm going to be going through are basically name designs. In most shop settings, what you're going to find is that your name designs are going to consist of at least 50 to 75% of your top-selling designs that you have up on display. First color I'm going to be starting with is aqua. And you're going to notice that in a lot of the name designs that I do, and a lot of them that you see today, I start off with a real gestural stroke. In other words, I like to get down a lot of color right away. I like my name designs especially to be very vibrant, and that's for a couple of reasons. First and foremost is probably that it's the best way to catch someone's attention as they're walking, past your shop or in a mall. Secondly, I like the freer way of painting. I'm not a real constricted kind of painter. My style is real loose. But in the same respect, I also get a very tight look to my work. So just keep that in mind as you're watching these and while I'm building it up. Right now I'm just taking the color, building up a lot of layers. You notice too that I also like to use a lot of action in my designs. I think that's helpful as well in, capturing people's attention, making your designs more interesting, making your design base flow through your shop. I think that's very important. Because after all, what are we trying to do here? We're trying to sell a product. A lot of people say, oh, you paint t-shirts. I thought you were an artist. And, that's a popular notion among people, that don't do what we do. But they're right. In essence, what we are is selling product here. We're artists, but we're also retailers. So you got to keep that in mind when you're developing your design base and the way that you want your shop to look. All right, I'm just kind of really saturating the area. You notice that I'm using a lot of paint here. The next color that I'm cutting into here is my phthalo blue. I just want to make a note here that all of the product, as far as the paint that I use, is Createx brand. I just feel that they have a superior flowing ability. They come out of your brush wonderfully. I don't get a lot of buildup on my tip, my needle, things like that. You can really appreciate that when you're, in the field that I'm in. Sitting around doing anywhere from, on an average day, about 30, 35 shirts. On a busy day, I think the busiest day I had this past season, I did somewhere in the neighborhood of about 110 shirts. So using a paint that's got an excellent performing quality is vital. So I recommend Createx to, all of the contractors that I have, everybody that works for me, we all use Createx brand paint. So you can see that I'm continuing with the motion here, all right? It's not like I'm just filling it in, in a side-to-side manner. And this is a mistake that a lot of beginners that I have make. They'll see this design and get to the point where they kind of get the outline like I did with the aqua first, and they'll start to color in this manner. That's a big mistake. You want to make sure that you keep with the flow of the design. In other words, because my design is flowing up and around, my paint application is going to be in the same manner, okay? You don't want to fill this design in side to side, or scribbling as I call it, because you're going to get a real flat, continuous look, so to speak. You notice here that when I was using the phthalo blue, that I really used it to flesh out these spheres as well. So not only am I using it to create a lot more movement in here, but I'm using it also to start to pinpoint my light source. In other words, I'm going to be having a light source coming from the upper right, and you'll notice that when I go in with the white highlights. So the phthalo blue is really used to create a lot of weight here in the bottom part of the sphere. The next color I'm going to be using is violet. What I'm going to be doing with that is further enhancing the idea of this light source. It's kind of almost like a drop shadow. Okay? And again, it's got the same idea of movement, okay, but with saturation. Okay, you can see I'm building up the drop shadow here and here. All right. All right, continuing to build up. And I'm also going to add a little bit to the edges of the blue here. Okay, to the phthalo blue, just to give it a little more added depth. Okay, right on the edge there. Also on the edge of the spheres, I'm going to punch out that bottom just a little more weight on the bottom. Okay. Okay, at this point we go directly into our name. I like to use a script name in this particular design style. Now you notice that in the first stroke in a lot of the designs that I've got the lettering, the first pass is very gestural, which means that I'm more or less laying down the shape of the lettering. Okay. The second pass is where I really punch out the lettering itself. In other words, I'm creating more parity between the thicks and the thins. Okay. So you can see that I'm building it up, creating more depth, so to speak, in my lettering. Okay. Now, a lot of problems that beginners have, and that I've noticed a lot with the guys that first start with me, is they have a real trouble centering their lettering. A good rule of thumb is you want to be at least a hand width down as far as the top of your lettering. And the centering, of course, is I usually follow a direct line straight down from the t-shirt. Okay? I went back and grabbed my violet, and I'm going to drop shadow this lettering. Now, as a side note, I got to tell you that I would have gone directly from my phthalo blue, okay, to my lettering, because I like to eliminate having to pick up the same color twice. So in other words, I wanted you to see how I formed that drop shadow and the principles behind this design before I got the lettering on. When you're doing this design at your shop, try to be as economical as you can in terms of which colors go when. So if you go straight from your phthalo blue to your lettering and then go back with your violet, you'll be able to do all that drop shadowing in your lettering and all of that drop shadowing around the spheres as well. The next color that I've got is opaque white. And the idea behind opaque white is to really punch out that light source that we talked about earlier. Okay? In this design specifically, I like to do a highlight that I'm actually drawing out. In other words, the natural shape of the paint coming out of the airbrush is a cone. So I could go in, now I can show you the difference on this one right here. I could go in and do a highlight like this. But you notice how much more diffused, I don't know if it's picking it up that well, how much more diffused this highlight is than this highlight. This one's a lot more crisp. So what I do in effect is I actually draw my highlight on and then fill it in, drying it and reapplying it as I go. And that really picks the white up. It really makes it very opaque. Okay, then I'm going to do a quick bottom shadow with my white, or bottom highlight I should say. And this step simply, what this does is really clean up the spheres. You notice when I first started that these spheres seemed a bit loose, a little bit, not quite as tight as what I would like them to be. But by adding that little drop shadow, or the little highlight with the white, it really picked them up and made them a lot harder. Okay? So that's the effect that we're going for there. And the same down here. This design can actually be used, and I've done it several times. It's kind of like a 2-for-1 design, okay? Well, more like a 6-for-1, really. You've got to remember that any of these designs that I do, you can apply whatever color palette you feel is popular where you are. In other words, I have this same design up in pink, fluorescent pink, violet, and fluorescent violet. I've got this same looking design up with my golden yellow, my red and my orange. The applications as far as colors are endless. It's just a matter of preference, what your customers are buying. And also, like I was mentioning, I've done this design where I'll actually write Mom's Bunch in the middle. and each one of these bubbles will have one of their kids' names in it. You know, a grandma's group or something like that. So it's an extremely flexible design. All right, I'm adding some highlights here, just to punch it out wherever I feel. I like going back into my darkest areas and adding the white. I really think that gives it an extra punch. I'm a big fan of the alternative lighting kind of light source, meaning, like I said here, lighting underneath the heaviest part. And now I'm going to go in and highlight my lettering as well. You've got to remember that when you're doing highlighting in your lettering, especially with a script with your white, that less is more. Okay? Too many times I see beginners especially, they'll come in and they'll actually highlight half of a letter thinking, wow, the more white I use, the more vibrant it's going to be. What they end up getting is a lettering style that looks half gray and half black. It has no pop to it. There's no vibrancy whatsoever. You can see here that I'm basically doing a dot and a quick drag down. Very subtle drag down the lettering, but it's vital to keep the continuity going. There you go. Typically this design will take me anywhere from literally 3 to 5 minutes to complete. Generally I charge about $15 to $20 depending on the location I'm at. My price includes the shirt, by the way. I'm going to tell you that right now. If I say a price, that's the shirt and the design together. Whatever works in your area is what you're going to use. That pricing system happens to work where I live. People like to have a one-price system. They just feel more comfortable with it. It's a great turnover, and like I said, a very flexible design. For my next design, we're going to be starting with phthalo blue. Again, it's going to be a name design. Like I said, I feel those are very important in terms of your design base, and primarily what we sell most of or in the shop that I've got. We're starting with an oval shape. Okay. Now you notice that I did this freehand, and it's still a consistent oval. This is, for a lot of people, it's not an easy thing to do. But the more you practice and the more you become familiar and comfortable with your brush and what it can do, it becomes a lot easier. You can become very comfortable with this design. Again, you can see I've got a lot of saturation going on here. I'm going around the outside. And like I said in the first one, I like a lot of action in my designs. A flat splash of color with a name over it is not my idea of a fun thing to look at. I like a lot of movement and a lot of, it just makes it for a more interesting composition as well. There's more things going on, more interesting to look at. What I'm doing here is a series of actually soft dagger strokes. Okay? In essence, what that is you're coming in hard in the middle of the design here, and you're softening it on both edges. So it's soft on both sides, so you can see that the edges of the stroke actually blend to the outside of the design. So I'm kind of continuing the same contour of this oval. Like in the first design, like I said, remember that when you're filling in the color and saturating, you want to stick with the shape of the actual design itself. In other words, for this one, you wouldn't want to color in this way, okay? You notice that when I filled the oval in, I went left to right, which is, the natural shape of that oval. You can go out as far as you'd like. I kind of like to taper it towards the bottom, so it doesn't go all the way around. It ends up kind of looking more like a little vibrating oval. Like I said, there's just tons of movement in this. It allows you to be more free as well. It's not such a rigid design. I think the biggest downfall as far as the beginners that I have with this type of design is actually that soft dagger stroke. That ability to start in the middle of your stroke and soften it as you go out also is not a very easy concept to get for a lot of people. Next, I moved in and I'm going to use my Caribbean blue. This is a lighter version of the phthalo blue. I've become a real fan of this. I actually didn't put it into my palette until probably 2 or 3 years ago. It's just a great transition color. You'll notice too that when you get going, a lot of the designs I do have a lot of fluorescent colors in it. This Caribbean blue is a great transition between fluorescent pink, fluorescent yellow. It creates a lot of different colors. When mixed with those fluorescent colors, it's just great. Again, you can see I'm moving in the design direction that I started with the oval. And basically what I did was saturated the rest of my oval. Okay? Like I said, I really like to have a lot of color in my designs. A little spot on the shirt with a name in it, this doesn't draw the attention of your customer base. Okay, like I said, moving left to right, getting nice saturation of that area. Again, I want to show you how I'm forming the shaping of this design as well, so I hauled out my violet again. And in essence, what I'm going to do is give it another light source. You'll also find in a lot of my designs that I like to choose an upper right light source, meaning coming in from this way as far as where our light is coming from. I find that if I'm consistent with this, it's a lot easier to go through the day and do all the designs the way that they're the way that they're displayed. I don't have to think very much, which is good for me. You'll find too that some customers in particular can be very picky about that aspect. In other words, well, you've got this in your display in your design, but it's not in my shirt. Even though over a period of time you've developed a look that you may or may not think is better looking, if it's on your display, it better be on your shirt. The next color that I've taken out is black. What I'm going to do is lay down my name. In this particular design, what works very well is a print style. Okay? You're going to notice too that a lot of the colors and the print styles that you use are going to be very gender specific. I have a column out right now called T-shirt Tactics, and the last two columns that I did dealt specifically with this. It's not a problem, but a challenge in terms of trying to cater to a specific type of person. In other words, whether you want to believe it or not, there is such a thing as boy designs and girl designs in the world of T-shirt airbrushing. Okay, boy designs include those that, if we're talking color palette, more blues and primary colors, reds, yellows, things like that. Girl designs would be exactly what you think they are. Lots of pinks and purples. The lettering is a lot more flowing. In terms like the first one I did, it was a script style, which caters a little bit more to that type of design look. This is a print style. This happens to cater a little bit more to a boyish look. And I'm going over again. Remember, the first time that we went over it was more of a gestural print. Okay, then we're going back in and filling it in and really giving it a big, bold touch. Okay, I've gone back to my violet now. I'm using this again to add a drop shadow. And you've got to keep consistent with your light source even in your drop shadow. Like it's stated earlier in this design, I'm going to have a light source coming in at this direction, so I want to make sure that my drop shadow is consistent with that. In other words, if I've got a light source coming in upper right, my drop shadow is going to be lower left. Even though it's a name design, you've got to be consistent. People pick up on those things instantly. The last step is going to be using my white again, the opaque white. And I'm going to start with my light source up here in the upper right side, just to give you an idea of where it's coming from. I like to use a nice hard highlight and come back again with an highlight on the bottom. Just really picks it up quite a bit, gives it a nice hard edge. I'm adding a little bit of highlights here on the edges as well of the oval. Okay. You gotta remember too, there aren't any laws regarding what we do. Whatever looks good is the only thing that I really govern myself by. Economical and looks good, I guess, would be the two biggest things. All right. Now, as far as the lettering highlights, I'm going to change this one to a mid-section highlight, which means that I'm basically moving along the center of my lettering and highlighting it as I go. I'm doing a nice crisp dot and trailing it down the letter. And it's okay to go over these a few times. You really want these to pop out. And for the final touch, what I'm going to do is add a nice little starburst on the bottom. Remember, if you've got it in your design, you've got to make sure you give that to your customer. Okay? Little halo around it, really pick it out, build it up a little more. There you go. This particular design I sell for about $15 to $20, depending on where I'm at. You can use a variety of different palettes with this. This happens to be the most popular for me. I also like to replace this upper Caribbean blue with some aqua, but I happen to like this look the best. For the next design, I'm going to be starting with fluorescent violet. I really love the transition that fluorescent violet offers between, the two most colors that I transition it between would be fluorescent pink and violet itself. It's a great way to transition between the two without getting a real abrupt color change. Okay. Like I said before, using a lot of motion. It's kind of good that you're seeing this too. I'm getting some skipping in my brush, in my line work. And that's alright because I really use a lot of color. And that's one of the reasons why I saturate with a lot of color. Your equipment doesn't work perfect all the time. You're just going to have to learn how to deal with that. Although we'd like it to, it normally doesn't happen. I tell all my beginners that the hardest thing you're going to have to deal with is learning how to fix and deal and get your equipment running when you've got a breakdown and you've got a stack of shirts to do. It can be the most frustrating experience, but you've got to learn how to deal with it. You've got to learn how to cope with it. Okay? You can see that by going over it a few more times, I was able to close those gaps up in some of that line work. So now it's not a big problem. As a side note, in trying to deal with problems that you have as far as troubleshooting, you notice that I had some skippage in my paint application. The number one reason is generally that the hole on top of my bottle is not properly open. Typically, what the process will be that it's in the bottle or the siphon and not in the brush. Those are the first things you want to look for. Then I'll clean out my siphon, then I'll clean out the entrance to my brush, and in the very last case, I'll take my brush apart and clean that as well. So those are some of the things that you've got to be prepared for in a business setting. The next color that I'm picking up is fluorescent pink. Like I said, I like to use the fluorescent violet as a transition. In other words, kind of blend it into the pink as well. The pink part is actually making up the main part of the body of this design. Again, this is a lettering design, a name design. So I'm really going to saturate the color. Get it down there nice and vibrant, nice and thick. It's a simple approach, a nice, easy block. I'm using that soft approach with the dagger stroke on both ends as well again. In other words, the heavy application is in the middle, and then I'm blending it out as I go. I'm continuing on with my aqua. You may not think that this is an obvious choice to move into as far as this lettering design with these colors that I've used, but I've found that this is a very popular look, the pink-aqua combination. Coming down my design, lots of action, lots of movement. Alright. You notice too that I ended each one of my strokes on the top and the bottom with a little bit of a round ball. I like to have, a definitive beginning and end to my look. I don't really particularly like my stuff to trail off, that much. All right, lots of saturation, lots of color. All right, the next step, of course, is to add the name that we want. If you take a look at the palette that I'm using, this design is actually more popular selling to women, to girls again. So what I'm going to do is pick a script style of name. Going back over my lettering, punching it up. Really what this does, again, is just really creates a lot of more bold line work. Okay? You want to be able for your client to see the name. Okay, we're going with the violet again, adding that drop shadow. Now, as another element to this design, I like to clean up the edges a little bit. I'll actually take my violet and edge some of my line work on the bottom. Really quick motion. If you go too slowly with this, it ends up looking very labored. Okay? So this really will separate those that have a mastery of the dagger stroke from those that do not. You can see that as I bring myself into this part of the design, I've got to have a clean taper. That's a dagger stroke right there. If you don't have that element in your design work, it's going to look very heavy-handed and just too muddy, real bulky. I'm also adding a drop shadow to that part of my hard line. In other words, I came in with the hard line, edged out those lines, edged out these areas in here, and now I'm coming back with my violet with a soft line and drop shadowing that. The last step again, highlighting. I usually go over it a couple times just to build it up. Remember to make it as crisp as you can. Less is more. And I'll actually go back in and start and do a little bit of a, give it a hot spot here up on the top parts. A little bit of highlighting on the top as well as on the bottom. You notice that I'm putting these hot spots on just the tips or the ends of that line work that I did in my initial step. This is just to add a little bit of flavor to it, make it a little more visually interesting. And again, I'm going to add another starburst in the middle. I'm also going to add a little bit of like a cluster around it. This is just a kind of a process of pumping the trigger and moving further back and closer to the surface. By pumping the trigger, what I'm saying is that I'm moving back and forth in a rapid motion like that. And that's going to create the different sizes, that in conjunction with the distance that I am from the surface. It's another technique you've got to master. All right, there it is. This design will sell typically for about $15 to $20. Takes me roughly 5 minutes of work time. Try to remember to incorporate a different palette in that. I think I've got 3 or 4 of this same design up with a different palette. So again, very flexible to work with. Next design, I'm going to start off with my phthalo blue. Fairly similar to the Samantha design that I've got in the series here. In that we start off again with a big swatch of color, lots of movement. At the very top of this one, however, what I'm going to do is kind of add a little swoosh to it. You know what's great about this design is I actually got the composition from someone who ordered a shirt that came up and said, listen, I want something that looks similar to that, but I want to have more of a hard edge. I said, well, what do you mean? He said, you know, maybe a little pointier at the top, but I want it to be fluid as well. All right, so this was a direct result of that request. And you're going to find that too. A lot of the designs that you have are going to come from your clients. They're going to come from your customers. You've really got to listen to them. You know, the old saying that I don't know art, but I know what I like is very true. You've got to listen to them because they're the ones that are buying your product. Okay, to keep the continuity going as well, I'm going to put it on the bottom. We're going to add that same swoosh. All right, again, saturating, lots of color. And notice the movement on this one. It almost has a real yin and yang kind of feel to it. Some random lines in here again to give it some motion. You notice that I don't have the same intensity in this. In other words, there's some lights and darks in those lines that create more motion as well. I've grabbed my aqua at this point. And I'm doing a saturation in the blue and then moving up into the middle. Same up here. I'm doing saturation in the blue and moving down into the middle. This is important because you want to get generally a little smoother transition from that phthalo blue to the aqua. Okay. I'm also going to give it a little edge up here, carry that color onto the top. And I'm just doing a light fill here. Just a light fill of some of the lighter areas. Picked up my fluorescent green now. And I'm using that to blend into my aqua and then into the center of the design. This is really the hot spot of this design. Everything kind of rolls into the middle and then rolls up into this fluorescent green. So I want to make it as vibrant as I can. Using that soft dagger stroke, nice and hard and saturated in the middle, soft as I work my way out. Violet is the next step. You notice I really love this color combination of using the violet with the blues. I think that it just adds so much depth to the look. And what I'm doing here is edging this swoosh that I put in. And edging it and giving it a real hard look. Lots of depth there. And I'm kind of using the violet as well to curve this design out. Like I said, it's heaviest on the top and the bottom here and here. And I'm using a shading technique to give it that heavy edge, to give it that nice depth, that nice look that we want. Some more action. Use your violet to give you that motion. Then I'll come back with a nice soft line. I love to use violet as a drop shadow too, especially with designs like this. Just adds a nice touch. It's also a time-saving technique. You don't have to be as careful with your colors. Okay, you can use the violet to clean up the edges. It's supposed to be there. It's used to cover up if you've got a little bit of overspray. I don't get much overspray now, but occasionally, it happens, and it's nice to have a little something to fall back on like this technique. I'm going to use a script style with this again. I just feel that this style really lends itself well to this look. There it goes. Don't worry about that. What I was referring to was this area right here. I had a little clog in my brush, and I was trying to get it out, tactfully by pulling back on my trigger and hoping that it wouldn't blow up. I had a little bit of a problem here with it. Let me show you what we can do to compensate for that. Okay? It's not a huge problem. I mean, we didn't get a big blow up there, but simply what you do is you take the rest of your letters and you form them to match the width of that. Okay? It's not a drastic thickness, so it's not going to be, overbearing in any sense. But you can see now that, I'll stop here for a second, you can see now that these lines all correspond or all match, and this end line is a little bit weak now. All I have to do is thicken that up, and I've got a completely coherent looking word, nice looking design. It's another one of those, challenges you're going to run into in doing a design, and you've got to learn how to handle it. You've got to learn how to cope with it. For God's sakes, whatever you do, don't say oops either. Oops. What? Why did you say oops? Rookie mistake. Another drop shadow. Nice and easy. Remember, when you do that, you've got to step away from your surface. You can see how far back my brush is compared to where I was when I did the lettering, which is up here. When I'm doing the drop shadow, I'm at least, 3-4 inches back. It's going to create a lot softer look for you. Highlights are the last stage that we're going into. If you haven't seen it by now, I've got a distinct pattern when I'm doing my name designs. I like to get the color, especially with this type of design. I mean, there's other ways of doing it, and we'll show you those in some upcoming designs here, but I like to get the color down first. I like to focus on the design of that, and then I like to go back in with the name, and then finally end with a highlight. I mean, it makes perfect sense. Going back over, kicking those up. Add some more motion here with the white. Punching those out just a touch. There you go. This design generally sells for about $15 to $20. And don't forget to be flexible in your palette as well. If someone wants a different look, you've got to be very accommodating to your customer. I've also taken this design and at times really stretched it to the top. If they want to fill the shirt out a little bit more, taking the swoop up a little bit further to the top and to the bottom. This adds a little more dimension to it. Overall, a very flexible and good design. For the next design, I'm starting with Caribbean blue. I'm going to be really loose with this. I'm starting with a big diffused circle. You can see how far away from the surface I am. I've got to be at least 6 to 8 inches away. I'm adding a lot of color here. Saturating the area. And then I'm going to be blending in just a little bit. I'm backing up even further. Using a little less paint and kind of blending into the middle of the surface. Alright. We continue with the same color. We're adding these really soft dagger strokes. They actually break the plane on both sides of this oval. In other words, they're coming out on this side, and you can see that the edge of the oval here. They're breaking the plane this way and this way. We want them to jut into the middle of the design. You want to get varieties of thick and thins in terms of the lines as well. Don't make them all the same distance apart or the actual thickness. Don't make them the same. Give it a little bit of variety in there. Kind of taking some of those, pushing them in just a little bit more. Okay. Picking up the fluorescent yellow now. It's a little easier step. What I'm doing is blending into that edge of the oval, continue with that same motion, blending in with the fluorescent yellow through the ends of the points on the inside, and then ending, it probably looks like about 3 or 4 inches to go right in the middle. You've noticed too that I switched to using a gray shirt. This is actually an ash colored shirt. I only carry 2 different colors of shirts in my shop. I carry white and ash. I find that it offers a little bit of flexibility to the customer, and I really don't enjoy painting on dark shirts, so this is about as dark as I go for what I've got in my shop. Going to a fluorescent pink now, and I'm kind of creating a center hotspot there with that pink, and then dragging my lines to the outside. Now, if some of you haven't guessed already what I'm trying to emulate, is actually going to have a real kind of tie-dyed look to it. I've seen a lot of different versions of this. In fact, I teach at the Getaways with a friend of mine, Terry Hill. He's got his own version of this. I really like that as well. Mine's got a little bit different twist to it. A little bit easier to do. Sorry, Terry. All right, pushing those out, and they almost intersect with the blue lines, okay? And let's get to the point where we're kind of blending them in, but we're stopping just before that. Now you notice too that with that fluorescent yellow, with the blue, I've got a transition between the Caribbean blue. Now I've got a green where it mixes with my yellow. Then I've got my fluorescent yellow. Then I've got an orangish look where it blends in with the fluorescent pink, and then I've got the pink hotspot in the center. So with just those 3 colors, what we're able to get is a transition of actually 5 different colors. Now I'm starting in with my fluorescent violet. Really what this is going to do is kind of edge out these lines out here. Just going to punch them up a little bit. Not applying a lot of paint. Nice soft stroke on both ends. Kind of coming around the entire circle. Punching them out just a little bit. Same process as we had with the blue. Variety of different sizes, different widths. Not all of them have the same consistency or intensity. The lettering style is probably what separates this design from the rest more than any other. It's just a look that I've developed. It really doesn't have any. I've kind of got a set pattern for it, but not a real rigid one. Okay, it's kind of a real swirly look. Because I'm trying to emulate. I'm trying to get that feeling of kind of a flower power look. All right, so a lot of the endings of the letterings will have a dagger stroke twirl at the end. In other words, I hit the end and I bring it around with a kind of a dagger stroke that's got a twirl at the end, a little circle. I'm going to finish these out just to get the gesture down first. I wanted to show you what the process was in those first couple. Again, the gesture is very important with your lettering. Not only does that loose style help you with your centering of your lettering, but it just gives it more of an overall appeal. The construction of it is more solid. Okay, building up my color, building up my letters here, using thicks and thins. And back over, a little quick build up of these colors over here. And you can see it, real interesting style. It's not the most legible style that I've got, but a very interesting and fluid style to look at. Moving on to the violet. I'll try to give a little depth here again with the drop shadow. I just love using violet as a transition color for all these drop shadows. It blends with just about anything. Of course, you get it in with the pink and it turns a little bit purple. Even with the yellow, it's got kind of a goldish look to it once you get it in there. Real flexible color. I just love using it for that piece, for that style. All right, with the white, we're going to come in and do some highlight work. Again, last step that we've got. Very crisp. You don't have to do highlighting for every lettering style that you've got. I personally like it because I think it just adds a little bit of a zip to it. I get a lot of people saying, hey, what are those white dots for? You got to explain to them, well, that's kind of a highlight. It just brings out the letters a little more, little shape. You notice, too, that I'm also hitting the top part of the swirls. In other words, if the swirl comes around and tails towards the top part, I want to hit that as well. So it's very similar to the top part. It's facing up, so we want to give that a little emphasis. But notice how, with the addition of the highlights, notice how now that drop shadow really pops out. It really creates a good illusion of three-dimensionality. Pricing on this design, as always, is $15 to $20 for this type of design. I just really love the colors that we're using here. I don't vary from this color palette at all. This is the only design that I've got up like this. I think it works very well together, trying to bring across that 60s feeling and the tie-dye look. It's a great addition to your design base. I'm going to be starting with violet for this next design. Coming back to the popular, very flexible oval look. Building up the color. Moving along the shape of the design to get my shading in. Now at this point, there's really nothing too unique about this design. It looks, pretty similar to a lot of the other designs you might see. But then with the violet, what I've done is, and I tried this past season with a lot of success, I wanted to get a look that had like a stretching appeal to it, something where it actually looked like it was coming, kind of stretching off of the shirt. I came up with this look with, again, using the violet, where I'm doing a series of ellipses that end. It's kind of like a comet. In other words, you've got the head of the comet that's almost butted up against the oval, okay? And then it trails off towards the end, and you've got the soft dagger stroke at the end, blending out to the rest of the shirt. This is actually the hardest part about this design, all right? In terms of the most time-consuming. Nothing about these designs is particularly difficult. I mean, once you've mastered, the basic strokes and things that you need or should know, it's just a matter of what takes more time. You'll see that I'm not actually touching the oval. Not really. I'm kind of coming up against it. I think that creates a little more tension there. Craig Fraser's actually got a lookout where he does a skull that's kind of coming through, and I've seen it in some articles that he's done in some how-tos. I just think that's such an effective look. Craig does a really excellent job at this, and I'm not saying that I got this from Craig. I don't actually know exactly where I picked it up from, but I've always admired that look. I've always liked that look of the stretching, and I think it just makes for a real visually interesting composition. All right, finishing up those stretches. Real soft blends at the end now, just kind of carrying it out just a little bit further. Okay. You notice too that they're not all the same size. If you work your way around this, this one's a little bit fatter here. This one comes a little bit thinner, kind of medium. Then we're back to fat again, and the spacing is a little bit varied. So you want to keep that in mind when you're using the violet. Picking up the Caribbean blue, come in and saturate and do a blend up from that violet on the inside. Then going with the flare of the oval. And then we also take it and what I'm basically doing here is filling in the crevices or the cracks in between each one of those stretch marks, so to speak. Kind of a side note, I like to work on 50-50 blend shirts, okay? I know I mentioned that I carry just the gray and the white, or the ash and the white at my shops. And I also like to use the 50-50 blend style shirt. I just think that they've got a more receptive surface. The 100% are excellent, very thick. Some people like the 100%. I like the 50-50. They just, the 100% is a little too hairy for me, a little too nappy. And also the people in my area generally like the 50-50 better. I think that was probably the deciding factor for me in using that type of shirt. And they're less expensive. They're not as expensive as 100%, so it was a natural, obvious choice. Fluorescent pink comes next. This was a great twist on this design. I've had it up where I just had those two colors and I wasn't getting the response that I wanted. So all I did was kicked it out a little bit with the fluorescent pink, and we started to sell quite a few more of these. I think it was just that additional oomph, that little additional color added that really kicked it out. Kind of blending it into the Caribbean blue there. And that's it for the pink. Using the black, I'm going to come in and do the lettering next. I like the script style with this look again. I just think that it lends itself well, has a lot of movement. As always, going back in to thicken up the letters. This two-step lettering approach is so effective. It's much easier for beginners to get a grasp on than going directly from the real dramatic fix and things. You tell them, hey, you can lay down the basics of this lettering style and then come back in and thicken it up. I think it's a lot less daunting. They're a lot more comfortable with it. There we are. I'm going to drop shadow this word again with the violet. I'm going to go back in and just hit the bottom of this a little bit. Let's get a little more of a kick there. There we go. Highlighting this word, coming back with our opaque white. Keep your light source in mind. Not so much in the lettering, but when we get to the little highlights here in the oval. I know for whatever reason I really liked the oval, the use of the oval as a complement to my lettering. And, I don't know if it's just that I'm more sensitive to it, but I've started to see it more in major advertising with some logos. It's kind of like that. You never notice all the new cars out there until you get one. Kind of an idea. It's the same thing. I don't know if it's just me, but I think there's a lot of national logos out there that are starting to use the oval or at least enhance it a little bit. Real crisp up here in the upper right. Once again, a bottom highlight to pick that out a little bit more. You can see that a lot of my highlighting principles are the same from design to design, okay? And the only difference here is that I'm actually going to go around the outside of my stretches and hit that with a real thin, not as vibrant white, okay? All this does is give it a little bit crisper edge, a little bit clearer, a little bit more solid. Okay, you can see that how just that little white around those edges really pick those stretch marks out. Another starburst and a little halo around it. Done. Pricing on this, you guessed it, $15 to $20. I just love the way that this design has a lot of action. It really pops out of the display. You put this in a nice display area. I mean, I generally frame mine with a pine molding around it with plexiglass over it. This design just pops right off of that. A great addition. This is the first design that I'm going to be doing that I'm actually pulling my black out first. Most of the time what I'll do is lay out the color base of the design first and then go back in with the lettering. In this case, what I've got to do is kind of lay out the setup of my design and then go back in with the color. And that's what I've got to kind of focus on here. Kind of leaving this a little bit of a mystery for you, see if you can figure out what it is, or how I'm going to do this. I developed this design while I was working in Vegas, actually. I was a worker out there at a casino called Excalibur. There was an operation set up out there that I was a part of, and I really enjoyed. And a lot of the stuff that we did was based around, medieval themes, kind of like this one, which, if you haven't guessed, is a jester hat. So you can see now I'm laying out with my black, and if I didn't do this step first, it would be very difficult to come in with color and know exactly where to go. That's why you have to reverse the order on this type of design, especially with, the thicker, the bubble or block letters. I like to call them block letters. Most people ask for bubble letters. I know what they mean. To them, this is a bubble letter. To me, this is more of a block style. You can see that I'm not drawing it out. It's been quite a number of years, actually, since I've actually drawn my lettering out. I feel that I'm just a lot more fluid with it. I'm a lot freer if I don't draw it out, and I also don't have those nagging little lines, those reminders if I, happen to miss a cue or miss a line. All right. At this point, we're going to continue with the black, and all I'm doing is reinforcing, or going to reinforce, those lines around the design. In other words, just on the outside. I'm not going to venture into the middle of the design. Like this line work here, I'm not going to go in there. I just want to reinforce the outer part of the design. I also like to square off my edges. I'm not a real big fan of, especially with this style, of a real round edge look. I like to keep my edges fairly clean and square. Also, the inside gets the same treatment. Tend not to go as thick, but I want to pick that out a little bit more. You can see that this approach really develops this look into more of a whole design. You're actually seeing the outline first of more of a design than just individual letters. So, and it makes it easier to fill in with color as well. Okay, this is yellow. And Createx actually has a variety of different types of yellows. They've got golden yellow, they've got fluorescent yellow, and they've got yellow, which is what I'm using now. And I actually use all three in my palette. So what I'm doing here is laying down my first color. Now you can see, as I said, with having that outline and treating it more as a design, look at how I'm coming across the letters and getting a nice fade down. Okay? If you were to go in each letter individually, it would take you a lot longer. You have to spend quite a bit more time on that technique. And I also know that I'm going to have an outer color too. And I teach this a lot at the getaways. If you know that there's going to be a darker element around your lettering, you can't be extremely messy and, out of the realm of the lettering, but you can be a little bit freer, which equates to a little bit faster turnaround. Okay, I've got the balls in my design and the hat here. Hitting those with the yellow as well. Coming in with the fluorescent orange, going to start to blend up into my yellow. I like to work from light to dark when we're working with colors. I feel that that offers me a little more understanding of where my blend line is going to be. And also, if it's a lot easier to go darker than it is to lighten something up. So for that reason, I try to start with the lightest color in that area that I'm working on. Working my way down the lettering. Again, notice that as I'm filling it in, I'm following the contour of the lettering. Alright? That's very important, otherwise you get a scribbled look. Even in the lettering itself, I'm following the contour of the letters. Okay? Like if I'm blending up at the A, I'm going along the lines, or as a C, or if I'm coming to the end of the K here, I'm blending up along the lines. Now with the final color, red, I'm going to go in and blend even further. Try to create a little more depth in the bottom of the lettering style. Red you've got to be real careful with. It has a tendency to have the effect of a lot of overspray. And like I said, you can't get out of hand with your color application, but because we know we've got an element going around it, we're going to be okay. Blending up into my orange. And I also know that I've got an element up here in the hat that I'm going to be using red, and as long as I've got it out, we'll fill that area in. For the hat up here, I just like to saturate the whole area. Okay? I don't mess around with the seams or trying to create any depth up there. It just takes too much time, and it's just not as effective either. So I'm going to finish with one of the other sections of the hat using fluorescent green. Following the contour, saturating it with color. Nice and simple, real easy. And the final color in our hat is going to be fluorescent violet. I also used to use fluorescent raspberry in my palette. But I found that there just wasn't enough distinction between, for my liking, between the fluorescent pink and the fluorescent raspberry. So what I did was I switched over to the fluorescent violet. I think it's just got a little bit deeper, more towards the violet side, of course. It's just a better transition color, a little bit deeper. With violet, what we're going to do is actually start to border the entire design. Okay? This is an important step because if you have any accidents, it's a great way to cover that up. And it just adds another element, another dimension to the whole look. And I also love the way that the violet plays off of the fluorescent green in the hat, the fluorescent violet in the hat. I just think it's a great color to use in conjunction with those. Okay, real simple process. And I'm also going to do a fill on the inside where these part of the letters are. And notice how that crisped up that entire area. Really made it pop. Just by adding that darker element in the middle of the lettering. Okay, I'm going to try to take up a little more room with this design as well. I like all my stuff to be really big. So what I do is I'll take the same color, the violet, and I'll actually do just kind of a real quick gestural outline of the outside of it. Okay? And instead of adding a highlight or a starburst with the white, what I'm going to do is take my violet and add some color to that. Okay? And we're going to put some bursts in there. Again, we're pumping the trigger, varying distances from the surface. And I'm going to put one over here, just to equal out that area a little bit. The violet, too, is a great way to add a lot of depth to this part of your design. I used to go in and add, like, I'd use a darker green, like a phthalo green. Then I'd go in here and I'd add, like a maroon to do the red. But I found that the violet can actually do that job just as nicely, and people aren't, they're not going to worry about it. And it saves me a lot of time. I bet you that cut off, at least 2 or 3 minutes from this design, just by not having to change colors that many times. And I like coming down here with the red too, with the violet, and really giving it a nice, thick, deep look. You can see how well that blends in with the red. It just does a great job of deepening that color up. We're actually even going to the outer part of the hat here. And the violet turns like a golden brown. It's like I said, it's just a great complement. Coming in with the opaque white, I'm just going to do a quick edging of the bottom part of this lettering style. And by edging, I mean that I'm going to follow just the line, the black line of that work on the bottom. Okay? Just love the contrast that brings to the entire design. If you're a person that works with a lot of opaques, feel free to, use an alternate color in the opaque. I happen to use only black and white for opaques. I don't have a whole palette of opaque colors. I don't really have a need for it. But let's say you want to come in the bottom here with an aqua, an opaque aqua. I think that would be an excellent choice, just to offset that color, add a little more variety to it, a little secondary light source. If you can imagine that there's a bluish-green light source coming up this way, that aqua would work tremendously to achieve that effect. Just adding a little bit of a highlighting in the hat itself. I'm going to punch out those seams just a little bit. And look at how much paint I'm using. Barely any. I mean, you can achieve such a desired result with just a little bit of paint. You don't have to kill everything. This design is a little bit more expensive than the previous ones that I worked on. Generally it runs about $20, $25, a little more time involved, a few more steps that you've got to go through. But having the variety of the look in terms of the lettering styles is far outweighs any time or problems that you're going to have with this design. Once again, just a great addition to your overall look. For the next design, the first color I picked up is fluorescent violet. And as you may probably have guessed, I'm going to be using an oval to lay out my design. The difference between this one and some of the other ones that I've done is this one's at a little bit of an angle. The other ones have generally gone straight across, nice and centered in the middle. This one is definitely, it's got a left to right, lower left, upper right angle to it. And that's comfortable for me to do. Being right-handed, that's a lot more comfortable than coming this way across the shirt. And you're going to find that too when you're brushing. There's going to be some lines that are more difficult to achieve than others. Probably for a right-handed person, the hardest line to do is a lower right to an upper left. It's just not a natural drag through your body like a right-handed person would have. So I try to avoid those at all costs. I don't want you to think that I'm being too overly redundant with this shape as far as the designs, but I just sell a ton of these looks. I just, I was looking through it here, and I'm thinking, boy, I've got a lot of oval stuff here, but I sell so many of these. I think people really like the simplicity of it. They like the look of it. It's a contained design. Not a lot of, there's no overspray on the sleeves or overspray on the collar. It's got a nice look to it, and it's fluid too. And then when you get the highlights in there, it just really pops out, comes across very nicely. Okay, there we are. Pulling out the fluorescent pink. I'm going to go in and saturate the entire rest of this area. And I'm going to add a little bit to the outside as well. Just trying to carry that pink over into the other areas. Look at all the action that we've got going on here. It just really adds a swirling element to this design to have all of the lines around it and all that action going on. Very effective. All right, with the violet now, I'm going to continue to add that depth. I'm going to make a little distinction here too. You notice that I went around the lower edge of this with my violet. Then I came back in and shaded it with violet, but I didn't hit the edge entirely. What this does is allows us to have kind of a light source on the bottom that picks that oval out a little bit more. It's not as heavy-handed. It's a lot more effective approach to do it like that than it would be to carry the violet all the way to the bottom. A few more lines with my violet now. Kind of working in, getting a little bit darker. Notice the variety too. I'm close to the surface here, and then I'll fade back a little bit to get a distinction there. A little bit softer line and then a little bit harder line. I'm not the same distance from the surface the entire time. Got to have that variety in there. And I'm going to add some starbursts in here as well. These again are in violet. We'll do a little grouping of it. And in the lower left corner as well. If you don't have the mastery of the dagger stroke, these are going to give you mounds and mounds of problems. Like you have to have that down. You've got to have the basics in order to get to this point. Just a natural progression. You've got to do it. But notice the balance we have in this design now. We've got the swirling motion here, okay? Then we have it trailing off in the upper left and lower right as far as the movement lines, but then we offset that with the starbursts on the top and the bottom. Very balanced, but still has a lot of variety in it. Going in with the black now, focus on doing the lettering. As always, thickening up the letters. I've got to say that on a real busy day, you know, if I'm working out at the park and we have a lot of business going on, you know, the peak part of the season, it's a Saturday, you know, the park is just full, I'll generally not double stroke my lettering. I think it's a superior look. However, I've gotten to the point now where I can single stroke the lettering and it has the same effect. Kind of exaggerating the two steps here for you because I think it's important. It's going to give you a superior look. But time is money, so wherever you can cut corners sometimes is where you've got to do it. The drop shadow comes in next. I hope now that you're seeing the pattern going on here about the way that I approach things. I said it in a previous design, I am a very formulaic person, okay? I don't like a random approach to things, and I think it just makes it a lot more simple to approach it. If you have the same, you know, technique or the same numbering style that you do your designs with, it's just going to be that much easier to kick them out quickly. With the white, opaque white coming in, same light source, upper right side. And a little bit of a kick to the oval here, a little hot spot. And then I'm going to start in the center here, just kind of fade out to both sides. Because I've got this area of light and dark between my violet, I don't really have to, there's really not a need for me to get in there with my white, so all I'm doing is starting from the center, doing a dagger stroke out. The main point in the center of this will be another highlight, another burst. Okay. Some more highlighting. You'll find that I'm fairly random. I mean, I tend to stick to the rules, but then again, what looks good is what looks good. Sometimes you got to break the rules, you know, if you feel that it needs a little bit of a push there. in the lettering. Once again, real quick. And there you have it. Because of the time we spent on this design, the pricing again will range about $15 to $20. I also want to mention that when pricing things, there are two major distinctions. You have to keep in mind what amount of time you spent on your design, but you also have to keep in mind what is called perceived value by your client. In other words, some things that you think are very simple and take a short amount of time for you look difficult to the people out there, to the people that are buying your product. So price it accordingly. If it looks a little more difficult, make it a little bit higher priced. Just good economics. The next design again requires us to start with the black. We're going to come in with an outline. Work our letters. This is what I like to call like a funk style of letter. It's got a definite kind of a street look to it. But it's more legible than your classic graffiti look or style like that. And it's got to be, really. I mean, if you're looking at the bottom line, people have to be able to read their name. It's got to be legible. You notice too that when I'm laying out my letters with this, that a lot of my lines actually are dagger strokes. In other words, where a line meets another line, or where I'm ending my lettering, it's actually a dagger stroke. And that comes in very handy in laying these letters out because it's not heavy-handed. Okay, it keeps it very light, and if I have to do a correction in terms of my line work, it's a lot easier to do a correction with a light line than a dark line. Coming around and emphasizing those lines again, treating it more like a whole design than just separate letters. Push these out just a little bit. Hardest thing about this design for most beginners is just getting it centered. You'll find that when you do a lettering style like this, it's a lot easier to adjust as you're going. In other words, if you feel like you're stretching it too thin or too thick in one direction, your next letter you can deal with it by making it either thick or thinner. The next color is aqua. In effect, what we're doing is coming in and doing another fill of our lettering. I like to work light to dark. Gives me a little more flexibility as far as my colors go. I'm kind of working my way down each letter. And what I'll do is I'll come back and do a left to right stroke just to try to blend in the rest of the letters with each other. In other words, I'm doing a blend of each letter individually, then I'll come back in this style here to try to mesh all the letters together. In other words, moving left and right, I'll apply very light paint, try to blend the letters down just a little bit further. Nice and saturated, lots of color. Working with the phthalo blue next. This color is actually going to be used for a couple different techniques here. I'm going to be blending it up into our first color, the aqua. Then I'm also going to be edging around the black with it like this. Okay, so it's actually a dual process of fill and edging. Okay. All that does is add another dimension to our lettering, just to give it that nice edge around there. And what I'll do here is, with my blue, I'll actually lay down my border line here, which means that this is as far down as I want to go with my shading. Okay? And then I'll go back in and work my way up. This is another one of those designs where we know that we've got a darker color on the outside. Okay? So we're not too concerned with some of that overspray that we're getting here. You'll see how that really cleans it up here in just a minute. Alright, down to that line. Again, we've got to go back and edge in the rest of the letters. It also adds a little more distinction in terms of from one letter to the other. Probably the lettering style that I first got noticed for. In other words, the one that people looked at and said, wow, that's different. And I still use it today. I mean, that was a number of years ago, and it's still one of my most popular designs that I sell. With the violet, we're going to finish up the shading aspect by coming in heavy on the bottom, shading into our phthalo blue. And you get a nice edge here on the bottom, and then shade it as I go up. Okay, nice and smooth, nice transition in there. And you've probably seen me do this design where I'll take the violet and do some swirls on the outside. This is a technique that I like to use that takes up a lot of area. It fills up the shirt, and it looks basically just real cool. I'm going to do something a little bit different with this one. Even though I really like that swirl look, I'm going to come across and do kind of a slash technique here. I'm bordering it first with my violet, cleaning it up. But notice how, we step back for just a second, notice how that really solidified that whole area. It's very heavy shading on the bottom, and when we come back with our highlights, it's going to pick that out. But notice how that violet around the entire area really got it cleaned up a lot. Now we come in with the slashing. Basically, when we're talking slashing, we're just talking about a random collection of line work, some strokes that you have that end in a dagger. All right, and it's not a real pattern kind of a look. You're just trying to make it look it's a real agitated kind of look. You wanted to give it some vibrancy in the movement again. Once again, having a design that has a lot of motion is very important to me. I can really distinguish, beginners from advanced t-shirt artists just by the way that they apply their color and the way that they've got their design selection based. Beginners tend to be very timid with their color, not a lot of real saturation or application. The guys that have been doing it for a while know that this is, a technique that really helps out their display. I'm also coming in and pumping the trigger, adding some dots here. I'm going to just fill this area in here just so we get more continuity. Okay? And notice with these slashes too, I'm following the contour of the lettering. Okay? In other words, if I have a stroke here in the K that's coming up this way, I'm also going to carry my slash work up that way as well. Okay? You try to want to be as consistent as you can. I'm going to work my way around. Adding some dots, pumping the trigger, getting those in. It's a very random kind of experience with these. Wherever you feel it needs to be picked up, some element added, a little bit more color in an area, you can always use it that way as well. And I'm finishing up some of these dots with a dagger stroke as well, just to give it a little more motion, blend it in with those other daggers that we've got going on around there. Coming in with the opaque white, I'm going to add a nice edge to the bottom of our letters. Okay. When I get about halfway through, I'm going to stop and let you see what the difference is between the two looks. Now the light source for this one then would be directly underneath, so to speak. I mean, I'm breaking some rules here, but that's all right. I just like the look of edging it entirely around the bottom. But take a look at the difference in how it gets picked out between the first two letters and the last two letters. You can see that this has a lot, the edging really creates a lot more legibility. Just creates a lot cleaner look. Okay, I'm going to continue on, finishing up. And a few highlights here on the bottom of the curves of these letters. Punch these up just a little bit. There you go. I'm going to show you what I mean real quick when we talked about a secondary light source. I've already taken my opaque white and edged the bottom part. Now what I'm doing is actually adding a complementary color to this bottom to give it an extra punch as far as the edging. Complementary color, what I'm talking about, is the exact opposite side on the color wheel. In this case, is the color that I used on the bottom. Okay, so in other words, the complementary color to a violet would be an orange. Okay, or in that family. Something, and it also warms it up too. I like in my designs to have a nice balance in a lot of cases of cool and warm, especially when we're talking about a more complex design. You guys have seen some of my previous articles on cartooning and airbrush action, and I use a lot of alternate lighting in that. A lot of secondary light sourcing that is very effective. Simple name designs like this, I generally tend not to do it that often. I just wanted to give you a quick example here of what this would look like. You can see I built it up, but it just adds a real cool element to it. If you carry opaques in your palette in terms of what you've got for your paint, it's a lot quicker than it is adding white and then paint over the top, but it's just a real cool way to enhance your lettering style. Because this design is a little more time consuming, requires a little more effort, the pricing generally ranges about $20 to $25. But I just love the way this design looks. As far as a fat lettering style, in terms of its thickness, you can't go wrong in this. With this design, with this look. You can actually see, I know in previous issues of Airbrush Action, I've explored this whole lettering style, laid out the alphabet, so you've got plenty of references for that. Feel free to put it up in your display. It's a great seller and a great addition. For the next design, we're going to start with yellow, and we're actually going to lay out our lettering with the yellow, not as a background color, but as the lettering itself. Okay, this may not seem like an obvious kind of a choice or way to start the lettering, but once we get into it and you see how this develops, I think you're really going to like it. You know, I'm doing a print style here. The name I'm doing is Mark. This is kind of an alternative to my boy look designs. It's got a lot of the primary colors in it. Just kind of going back over and reinforcing those lines, making them a little bit thicker. Right, that ought to do it. I'm going to take my black, and what I'm going to do is outline the letters. However, I'm not going to butt up directly against the edge of the lettering. Okay, I want to leave some room in there because I know I'm going to be coming back with another color after this. Okay, so as I work my way around, you've got to keep in mind and remember that you want to leave a little bit of a distance between the two, okay? Darken that up just a touch. All right. You've got to remember, too, to get inside the letters to create that formation of them. But you can see now, just with adding this black, that it creates, obviously, an easier looking lettering design. You can actually see what it says now. I'm going to go back in and just kind of hit these up just a little harder. But I'm using a dagger stroke here and just kind of punching out the corners a little bit, okay? This makes a little more of a distinction of where the corners are and the fact that the line is changing a direction. With the red now, what I'm going to do is actually, now I am going to butt up against that yellow. Okay? This is actually a difficult design for beginners to get a hold of because there's so much outlining going on. Okay, the fact that I've already formed my letters and I've come back and outlined it once in black, now I'm coming back and outlining it again in red, really sometimes becomes a daunting task for these beginners. They're just not accustomed to being able to have that amount of control over their brush. They catch on pretty quick though. I don't actually spend a lot of time. You know, I train, or people that I come in that contract. I actually, we work on their skills together. But I like to get people right in the mix right away. I've always been a strong proponent that the best way to get people, to learn and to strengthen their skills is to put them under the gun a little bit. Start them to getting to make money, get them in there working for people. So what I'm taking now is my red, and I'm shading from the top down right now. So I'm actually getting a heavier part on the top part of my letters now. Coming down. And this style you've got to be a little more exacting as far as your shading that's going on because you have a specific area that you're trying to hit. Okay. I'm going to continue on with my fluorescent orange. Basically what I'm going to do is add on to that red that I've already started and blend it down into the yellow. And you can see that we're getting a lot of good blends going on here. And also what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my orange and actually edge the outside of my red. So now my line work that I'm using is in between the red line that I've used and my outside black line. Okay? And that's why we wanted to step a little bit further away with our black in that initial phase of it. Because I knew that I was going to come back and do some, use my orange and do some line work in between those two. But you can see how tedious this is in terms of the amount of times that you go around your design with a line. Now this actually works in reverse as far as perceived value. I got to tell you, I do sell quite a few of these, and I do this type of style quite a bit. However, it looks easier than it actually is. That's one of the bad parts about it. But I'm not, I don't want to replace it because, like I said, if it's selling, I don't want to mess with it. I'm just going to leave it go. But people look at this and say, wow, okay, you're charging $20, $25, let's say, for this one. And they'll say, well, it doesn't look as hard as that design over there. And it kind of catches you and you have to explain to them, well, it's a fairly involved process, and try to convince them that, yes, it is worth that. There's a lot of time that I'm putting into this design. There we go with the orange, but look at how hot that looks. I mean, that is such a warm design right now. With that orange bordering around the red line, it just really pops it out. Now I'm going to come back with a color that's, again, on the complementary side of the color wheel to what I've got going on in here. And again, it's a matter of cooling the design down as well. So what I'm going to do is, I've got aqua right now. I'm going to edge it one more time. Okay. You've got to be very careful when you're doing this stage because the aqua, if you're not exacting in where you're putting it, it'll actually look like it turns more green because if you get closer to the yellow, even though you may or may not be touching it, it's almost like a visual trick. It'll actually look like it's blended in there. So you've got to be careful. Okay, working my way around the name. careful just to butt up against the black part of the line. And I'll fill these areas in on the inside as well. That element of being able to clean it up. Well, this design starts fairly clean. I mean, there's not a lot of overspray that goes on when you're filling in this type of look. Okay, and just to further enhance the boundaries of this design, what I'm going to do is go in and put some starbursts up here. It just kind of makes it look bigger, you know, it just gives it a bigger presence. Just kind of, you know, spreads it out over the shirt a little bit more. And when you're doing it with this type of color, you know, especially because it's the complement to the color going around it, it really enhances, it really draws your viewing outside of it quite a bit more. I'm going to go down here in the lower left corner again to try to balance it out. Then pumping the trigger. You need some different size dots in there, just giving it some variety. I also want to darken up the top part of the letters just a bit. I'm not coming in very heavy-handed at all because I don't want to compete too much with that yellow that's in there. This is violet that I've got, and it works very well with giving it a lot more depth. We've used it in a lot of the designs that I've got at the shop in this respect, and it just adds a whole other dimension, really kicks it up a bit. There we go. But now you can see how heavy that looks on the top. Before it looked a little bit washed out. But now as you look at the design, you can see, you really feel the weight on the top of the letters. The last step is with our opaque white. I'm going to do some highlighting on here. I'm actually going to do a double, what would be considered like a double spot highlight. You give it two really hot spots. And again, I'm actually drawing it in. You can see that I'm doing, this is exaggerated of course, but I'm doing a circular motion like this to draw that highlight in, just to make it extremely crisp. Okay. I'll go down the length of the letter here, or the word. But the contrast now, if I would have left this just plain red on the top, without adding the violet, there wouldn't have been as much contrast up there in terms of getting my highlights in. Now I have an extreme difference in terms of light and dark up there, and it just works so much better. One more punch there. And we've got it. Pricing on this design, run about 20 bucks. I wouldn't go any higher than that. Like I said, the perceived value of this design is actually lower than what the time we spent doing it is. I think also it's a great exercise for beginners and, you know, anybody that's doing name designs to really get down control. I mean, if you count the number of times we actually went around an area, we have our outside 1, 2 the black line, 3 the orange, 4 the red, and 5 the actual lettering, you know, part of it. So we actually layered this 5 different times, and that's not an easy thing to do. But overall, once you're done with the design, the end product is worth the trouble. We're going to be moving away from just the name and lettering designs right now, and we're going to be going into something a little more involved. A lot of the designs that I do at the shop are what's commonly referred to as heart designs or lover designs or couple designs. If you take a look here, you can see that I've pre-cut a stencil in the shape of a heart, and I'm going to use this stencil to blow my paint through to form a specific image. This is a negative stencil, so we have to get the terminology in here so you know what I'm talking about, which means that the outside border will be forming the shape, and I'm going to be spraying the shape on the inside. The opposite of that would be called a positive stencil. In other words, the stencil is positively in your way. That's an easy way to remember that. I got to give Terry Hill credit for that because, you know, I just had problems remembering that myself until at a class he had said that to the students that we have there at the getaways, and it just stuck with me. I thought it was a great analogy. So at this point, we're going to be using the negative stencil to spray through, and I'm going to be starting with red first. Again, as with all the designs that we've got, you want to take your red and follow the contour of the heart. Okay, the thing that I like to do is I'll actually contour the heart around the edges, and then I'll cut straight down the middle. And the reason that I do this is I'll build up the color kind of like in a teardrop shape, which is, again, the common shape of this side of the heart. And I'll do that on the other side. And in just a minute here, I'm going to actually be taking my fluorescent pink and filling in that area. I like the look of having a couple different colors in my heart, more than just like a flat design look. A lot of the t-shirt artists that I see out there will color this in one flat color, as in with the red. I like to give it a little more oomph than that. Okay, a little more variety, a little more depth than that. You can see too, I just want to point out too that I've put a taped edge around the border here. I don't normally do that, but I've used a piece of 14 by 14 Pellon to cut my stencil, and the edges here would be just too close and wouldn't be able to hide that overspray. So what I've done is I've made a quick taped edge around the sides and on the bottom, put a crease in it, and that way you can see here all of the paint is caught in the crease. If you're trying, this is a great technique too, if you're trying to make a border around something, let's say you want a flat line going down the side of your shirt, and you don't want to cover the whole thing with paint, simply press it down, crease it in the middle, and bring it back up, and you've got a real nice protection there. Pulling out my fluorescent pink now, and I'm going to just really saturate the inside of that heart, really give it a lot of paint. But you can see that this gives it a more of a three-dimensional quality, more of a look where it's coming around in a circle, and ultimately that's what we're trying to get. We're trying to get that look of three-dimensionality again, just to make it very effective. With violet now, I'm going to come in and edge my heart. One thing that I really want you to notice here is how far back from the surface I am. I mean, if you measure this in inches, it's got to be at least 4 or 5 inches, and it's a very light application. Too many times, beginning artists will get in there and really kill this with the violet, and it just gets, again, too heavy-handed. There's not enough softness in there, not enough variety. And I'll actually take my violet and work my way up, kind of forming a crease right here. That just adds to the look of the depth and the three-dimensional look. I'll bring it down a little bit here in the middle. Just kind of tie it all in together. You can see now that here I've got all of the color inside of my stencil. So of course the next step is, of course, just to take our stencil off. Now notice all of this real soft overspray here around the stencil design itself. Once you pull that away, look at how crisp that is. Look at the difference. It's a great way to, really make simple shapes and do them consistently time and time again. This is usually the only time that I'll really use a stencil. I don't use stencils a lot. If you followed any part of what I do in airbrush action, in the column, I'm really a big fan of the freehand airbrush experience. However, in this case, it's really a necessity to use a stencil. All right, to have a shape like this and do it freehand is really not the smartest thing to do, and it takes a lot of time, which takes away money from our business. So you can see that the crispness, the edges of this design are just really make it pop off the shirt. Pulling out our phthalo blue now, the process here that I'm going to do is I'm going to edge the outside of my heart. Again, notice the distance I am from the surface. Real soft, nice and light. This is what really keeps your heart designs, especially from becoming muddy. You don't have to get in there with every color and get very dark. Now I'm going to take the blue again, and I'm going to put a border around it here. Even though I've used a stencil, this is where that freehand ability really comes in. The ability to be able to go around this heart, it's pretty close to equidistant all the way around it. Again, for beginners, that's not an easy thing to do. But once you get it down, it's very effective, especially with this design. Just going to saturate a little bit more. And then up in this same corner, I'm going to add another burst. A little halo and some more dots, little starbursts here. Using the violet now, I'm going to do the same process that I did over here in haloing this side of the heart, except I'm going to use a violet and do it this side. Hardest thing about doing this aspect of the design is, notice I've got to start within the blue here, make a continuous ring, and then connect with the blue down here. Again, this is probably the most difficult part of this design and the one that the beginners really have a difficult time adapting to. Now you notice too that once I get to that point with my blue in it, I'll actually take my violet and I'll blend it up into the blue as well. So I'm getting like a cross blending. The blue comes in this way, but once the violet hits the blue, it's also going in, so you get this nice gradual fade right in the middle. I'm going to go back down here and again balance it out with starburst using the violet. Alright, it's time for our lettering now. As with most of the hard designs that I do, I'm going to be using a script style. So we'll start here in the upper left. You know, when I'm doing a design like this, I tend to really like having the names come across to the design instead of stacking them on one another. I do have designs where I do that, but I just feel that, you know, with the starburst here in the corner and having the names come diagonally across, just adds for a little more balance in our design. Alright, go here. Alright, as always, I'm going to come back in and reinforce those lines. You know, it's a funny thing having this N in here. I have designs that I put up that have, you know, loves, plus, the and sign. I've really found that the N is really more of a non-committed type of design. The locations that I'm at have a lot of young, you know, a lot of teenagers in it, a lot of boyfriend-girlfriend situations. And you know, I find that they opt for the end more than anything else. I can only attribute that to the fact that it's not quite as permanent as most situations. So, all right, punching those out, getting them a little thicker. There we go. Okay, using the violet, we're going to come in again and add our drop shadow. Now we pull out our opaque white. In this case, when we do our highlights, I'm going to highlight the heart first. We actually want more of a diffused look, not such a crisp one as we were getting in a lot of the lettering designs that we had. So I'm just going to let the airbrush do the work, kind of layering it on top of each other. What you can do is you layer it down, you blow on it with the brush to dry it, then you put another layer down and it really builds it up nicely. Then I'm going to kind of border it with the highlights around there on the edges of the heart, on the inside edges. Okay, and then I'm going to go in and highlight the letters as well. Very crisp, that's what we're going for. I'm going to add a couple complementary highlights around the edges here. Price on this design will run about $20. Even though it has the perceived value of looking more difficult than the lettering designs, it's actually a little bit easier. It takes me about as long as it would for a simple script name. So this is a great one in terms of turnaround and just making the most out of your time. The next design, we're going to switch gears here and work with our positive stencil. So what I've done is I've taken 3M makes a product called Super 77 that I use to adhere this to the surface. Just a quick spray. Does the trick. It's pretty powerful stuff, so don't get carried away with it. We attach it to the surface, and I've hauled out my fluorescent violet, and we're going to use that to go around it. So as we use the color, to go around. What the stencil does is blocks that color from entering this area, and you get a nice heart shape within it. Now what I'm doing is I'm actually starting right next to the heart and building my way out using dagger strokes again. Like I said, if you don't have a mastery of this stroke, you're in some deep trouble. A lot of the stuff that I do, in fact, to be successful at this in terms of your designs and your business, you've got to get this stroke down. So I'm building it out as I go. And I really like this design, and you'll see it when I get the stencil off. It has kind of a buzzsaw look to it, with all these spikes kind of sticking out. Lots of action again. You know that I really like that look in a lot of my designs. Saturate it around there a little bit more. And you're taking this and you're going to be covering the entire area around the heart. There you go. I tend to go over the area about 2 or 3 times, in between some, seeing wherever I need to pick out, or add to the paint, add to the area, to make it a little more strong with the paint, if I need to saturate the area a little bit more. So if I've got some space, in between some of these spokes, all I got to do is go back in and fill them in quick. Not a long process. There you go. I'm going to saturate around it now, just to blend in everything. Now I'm going to be taking my violet. All I'm going to do is add a little bit of weight on the bottom. I'm not going to get too carried away with it. In fact, I only go up about a third to a half a way up the side of this heart here. And I'm also going to add a couple of the strokes, the spokes with the violet as well, just to give a little more weight on the bottom. There we are. Now we're going to remove the stencil, and as we do so, you can really see that area becomes an extremely crisp look. Again, that's the strength of the stencil, of course, is that it allows you to protect an area and really, flow with the colors without really affecting it, so you get a nice, clean look. I've got my fluorescent violet now. I'm going to go back in with that same color. And again, not quite going all the way to the edge. I'm going to do a gradual fade up into the heart. And you notice that I'm getting further back. As I start, I'm closer, and as I move up the heart and shading, I'm moving further back. There we go. Okay, with yellow now, this doesn't seem like an obvious choice. What I'm going to do is saturate the top part of this heart with the yellow. Okay, and you'll see why in a minute. Just like this. Go down just a touch into that fluorescent violet, and then round out the edges on the top. Following the yellow, I've grabbed my fluorescent pink. Now you can see that we're starting to make that transition. Before it was a little too abrupt. It's hard to make a smooth transition between the fluorescent violet and the yellow. However, with the fluorescent pink now, you can see that with the yellow it creates a real nice orange around the edges, but it's got that, it's got enough pink to really blend into, and you can see it in this area here a little bit, to really blend into that fluorescent yellow. And move up a little bit and really get a nice blend there. Using red now, I'm actually going to come in and kind of enhance this part of the fluorescent violet. And I do that because I'm trying to give it a little more of a cranberry look, a little deeper look. And I'm also doing it because I'm going to edge this part of the top of the heart as well. Okay? So now we've got a real nice transition between those first colors and up into our yellow. Alright, with the violet now, I'm going to do a soft edging on the bottom. Not quite as hard, and a real soft edging on the top as well. And then I'm going to blend up into that. Again, notice how I kept this ridge free to create that distinction between the outside and the inside. Okay? What you could do too, and what I haven't done, and I'll just throw it in quick, is a lot of times I'll actually take back my fluorescent pink And I'll do a nice saturated edge around that. Because once you create that distinction between this edge of the heart and the outside edge, you've got some area to work in there, and you may as well take advantage of it. There you go, but you can see how now that area down there becomes a lot more apparent in terms of the distance that we separated the outside from the inside. Using my opaque black, I'm going to go back in and fill in the names now. I'm going to, again, work diagonally across the heart. I don't want to stack them in this case. So I'll start up here in the upper left. And then for the center, I'm going to put loves instead. You've got to remember, you've got to keep that quite a bit smaller because it's not the focal point of the design. The names are the focal point of the design with the heart. All right, now I'm going to go back and thicken these up. There we are. I'm going to leave the loves alone. We're not too worried about that. We'll move down to the name in the bottom. There we are. Of course, we're going to do our drop shadow with our violet again. My favorite color for that. Nice and easy. Blends in well with all the colors that we've got in on the inside. There we go. Now opaque white is the last step. And we want to use this again to really edge out the heart. Make it jump out. There we are. Then we go back in the names. Really punch those out like that. Again, remember that it's a slow build up of the white. And I'll get those a little bit hotter spots there. Here we are. And I'm going to go back in and just have a few real diffuse hot spots right in the puffiest part of the heart, so to speak. Just kind of gives it an extra bounce. This heart design costs, again, $20 roughly. I just love the color combinations in here. It's not a typical heart design color combination with the fluorescence, violet into the orange and yellow, but it works very effectively in your display and just giving the customer a little more variety. Now we've moved from the single heart stencil into the double heart stencil. You can see that I'm using the positive part of this stencil to begin with, and we're going to be starting with aqua to go around the outside. As you apply your color, make sure you go in the direction of the design itself. You can see that I'm following the contour of the heart. This design in particular has a lot of motion around it. Generally what I do is I'll start up here in the left-hand corner and I'll work my way down, and it's just a bunch of squiggly lines that you'll see running across. It's very effective in terms of there's a lot of chaos on the outside. When we take the stencil off, you notice that it's a real nice full color in the middle there. So we'll start up here. Move our way down. Now I'm going to enhance these colors some more, meaning that I'm going to thicken them up. Okay? What I did is I slowed down my stroke just a little bit, and I'm giving it just a little fatter look. You see that it just has a lot of movement that goes through and around it. Just really draws you into it. Using phthalo blue, I'm going to add some depth on the bottom part of this. Just like this, real simple. I'm going to go in and also add depth in our spiral coming down, but only on the bottom side. You can see that I've got the phthalo blue coming and shading up, but I don't have any here on the top part of the swirls, okay? That's what we're looking for. We just want to give it a little bit of weight on the bottom. There we are. Using violet now, I'm go back in and I'm going to edge these out. Meaning that I'm going to run a nice, even dagger stroke line all the way from the crease to the outer edge of the spiral. This just gives it a nice illusion of cleaning it up a little bit. Okay? Again, you can see that you need to master that dagger stroke in terms of being able to where to start and stop. If you don't have the mastery down of where to stop, you're going to just have be running over lines and have a big mess. We're going to move back up here to the top, and I'm going to use the violet again to put a nice soft shadow underneath that. So what I do, just a little edge there. So what I do is I'll take the violet, I'll do a nice hard edge, and then I'll take the same color, the same violet, and do a nice soft drop shadow with that. Real nice effect. You can see that gives it a certain amount of, again, the three-dimensional quality that we're looking for. Anything to make it bounce off the shirt a little more. Okay, now we're going to remove the stencil. Again, as you can see that as we peel it away, we're left with an extremely clean, nice, workable surface. And the first color that we're going to come in with it is going to be fluorescent pink. Now we're going to take our fluorescent pink, and we'll edge the hearts. Again, not coming to the very end of it. We want to keep a little distance in there. I really do that because it allows for a lot less muddying. There's always that possibility that when you combine an aqua and a pink next to each other, they're going to be too muddy. So just leave yourself a little leeway there. We move over to this side of the heart. And kind of wash that in, fill it in. Nice solid wall. Now to really pick that pink out, I've grabbed my fluorescent violet again, and I'm going to edge this. And I'm going to add a little depth there on the bottom. You can see that I'm doing a little bit of a shading technique up from the bottom there. Same technique on this side. Okay, I've got my opaque black now, and it's time to go put our names in. What I'm going to do is move from the top left to the bottom right and add the names in conjunction with our design element that we've got. A lot of times what I'll do is offset those design elements, whether it's a starburst or a swirl or whatever, with the names in the opposite corner. In this instance, I'm going to move with that element. And we're going to go back and reinforce those lines again. Okay, coming again in with the violet. Let's give it a drop shadow here. As you can see, I've added the highlights. I feel you guys have a pretty good grasp on the technique that I use to apply those highlights. I just want to make a quick note where we put them up in the swirls, getting top and bottom, punched out the heart area a little bit more to really give it that three-dimensional oomph. This design, generally about $20 again. Really great addition. a lot of different colors in terms of, again, not a traditional kind of heart-looking design, but I sell so many of these, I just had to include it for you guys. And we're still with the double heart on this design. However, we moved into using the negative stencil. So we're going to start blowing our paint through there. I'm starting out with red. This is actually a very similar design in terms of look to the single heart that we did with the negative stencil. Except we're going to be using a double heart. Notice again I left the teardrops in the centers there. Very effective use of the red in terms of leaving space to add that fluorescent pink layer. Now we'll saturate those areas with the fluorescent pink. Just a general fill, real simple. You can see how quickly these designs go. I mean, we've only got one more step here on the inside and we're ready to pull it off. Here we've got the last color for the fill on the inside. And it's violet. I'm coming back and doing a nice soft edging to this. Putting a few creases in the bottom. Then keeping far away enough from the surface of it in terms of distance to give you a nice soft look. We'll pull the stencil off. Once again, voila, nice, clean, crisp design to work with. Alright, we're back to the violet now. As before, we're edging this. We're going to come around. Now with the phthalo blue, we're going to give that, 1 to 2 inch border that we have, that we did in the last single heart design, similar to this. And we're doing it, except this time we're doing it all in blue, all in the phthalo blue. The idea behind this design is actually that when I first started coming up with this design quite a while ago, that these were a couple of balloon hearts floating in the air, okay? So what we're going to do here is we're going to kind of fill it in, a little more fill with this. And a nice little touch down here is what I like to do is I'll take the phthalo blue and I actually add just real light little balloon strings to it. We'll tie off on the bottom there. See, it gets a little more of a feel of that. Maybe add a little more blue. Alright, there we are. Now with the Caribbean blue, we're just going to continue that trend. We're going to edge completely around the design with the Caribbean blue. This has got quite a more of a filled-in effect than the single heart. It's just got a little bit more color. I would say out of all the heart designs that I do, this is by far the most popular one. For whatever reason, the double heart, I mean, there's a lot of factors that might determine why that is. You know, the fact that it's more blue, I don't know, for whatever reason. But if it ain't broke, don't fix it. There we go. Now with the black, we're going to go in and fill in our lettering, starting here in the upper left corner again. Alright, let's go build those up. Now I just want to point out quick, I don't know if you caught this or not, but there's an area in here that I'm not very happy with. It's a flaw that happened when I was bordering this heart. You can see that it's very thick and it's uneven. It's a little bit blotchy. So what I'm going to do is, I've got to come back with my violet anyway. I end up kind of putting a little edge to this and the drop shadow and things like that. But there's techniques that you can use to cover that up. It's pretty simple actually. Let's go to it. I actually like to start in the area that I think is messed up just to get it out of the way as quickly as possible. I'm going to take my violet and I'm going to add a little bit of depth there on the bottom. Okay? Right away, that really cleaned that up. You can see that there's a little bit of area there in the blue where it's kind of blotchy. However, that violet really pulls you away from that. It really doesn't emphasize that at all. Now, if you do it for one, you've got to do it for all. In other words, we're going to travel our distance around the heart here. And we'll add those little indents where it goes down, where the border goes down into the heart. All right. And now, what you can do too, if you're still not satisfied with that, what I like to do is starbursts are a great technique for taking care of problems exactly like this. So what we can do is, I won't actually put it right over the top. What I'll do is I'll come down and off to the side a little bit, okay, with my violet. Put my burst in, and then I'll add my little trail. And in this case, I'm going to actually trail up the heart itself, going in both directions, up this way and this way. So now I've got these little starbursts that further draw your attention away from what I perceived as a mistake. Now, more times than not, the people that you're doing this for, they'll have no idea that you made a mistake. Okay? As long as you don't point it out, for the most part, they're not going to notice that. However, I don't wait for people to tell me that if I feel that there's a mistake or if I feel that I need to punch an area up, I go ahead and do it. So now we're going to add another one up here in the upper right corner. And again, we're going to use that starburst technique just to kind of track our way around. Ironically enough, this design already had included in these starbursts. So, I mean, it wasn't a big departure from what we were doing, but I wanted to show you in case you had a problem. Now, you might actually encounter people that will walk up and say, hey, that's not in the design out there. Very easy way to get around that. All you've got to do is say to them, well, listen, I really wanted to spend a little more time on your shirt. I thought this really added a lot to it. And it's just, a little something that I did as a favor to you. No one's going to complain. Oh, wow, thank you. Here's a tip. So don't count on it. It doesn't happen very often, but you never know. Okay, here you can see that we finished up with the highlights. We started off with some real crisp highlights in the lettering. Moved down and punched out the meaty parts of the hearts there. Let me point out too that I also added some highlights and some edging in the blue parts of the design. I did this just to give it a little more action, a little more momentum to move yourself down. We added some edging on the bottom and some on the top of the second heart as well. Overall, great looking design. This will run you about $20, or run customers about $20. It's a great addition to your heart arsenal. This particular design outsells all other heart designs at least 2 to 1. So you've got to make sure you've got this baby in there. The final design for this tape is going to be a variation of the couple design without using any of the hearts. A very popular theme. We're going to be tackling the beach scene. The first color that I'm going to be using is phthalo blue. Starting off with a very diffused oval, or circle again, excuse me. Basically what this is doing is outlining the borders of our design, okay? We don't want to get too out of hand. We want to give ourselves some boundaries here. All right, from this point we go in and we add kind of a horizon line. You can see that I'm working my way down and angling my lines as I go. In effect, what this turns out to be is the waves coming off of the horizon in the ocean, okay? Now we add a similar horizon line here, moving our way up, and this is kind of where the clouds will start as we move our way back. Next, we're using Caribbean blue, and we're just going to increase that horizon line a little bit, moving up. And we're also going to soften the edges on the outside of the phthalo blue that we just laid down. Okay? And what we're going to do too is build a little shading, a little gradation down from the top end too, because we've got some colors that we're going to be putting in the middle there that are going to blend into that. All right? I'm going to saturate my water part with it. At this point. Moving to our fluorescent yellow. Now you can see that as I spray it and blend it in there, what are we getting? We're getting green. That's just another property of blending these two colors together. I just love using the Caribbean blue for that fact. It's just a great blender of the colors and just lends itself very well to that effect. And remember too that water is a reflection of things around it, so we want to take this yellow and build it a little bit down here. So what we actually get is more of a green blue down in the water there, okay? Coming up top here, and we're going to end the blending there. With fluorescent pink, we're going to be starting at the top of the design. Move our way down. You can see that when blended with the Caribbean blue, the pink makes a nice violet or a nice purple. And as we move down into the yellow, you can see that it makes a great shade or blend of orange. So like I said, these three colors together are a great combination. You get just such a vibrant look and such a variety of colors with it. It's great. I'm using my black now. I'm going to start laying down the palm trees here. I chose on the left side to put them down. Any glaring weaknesses that you have in terms of your ability to perform a proper dagger stroke are going to become a glaring issue at this point. Because that's all you really have to rely on when doing these. Your ability to properly execute that stroke. Okay? Move down, we'll put some reeds down here. It's a way to kind of cap off the design. And kind of move down the horizon line there. I'm also going to add a thin line on the bottom to kind of border that out as well. I'm also going to add some of these reeds here on the bottom. Just doing varying sizes and shapes, distance, things like that. We'll move our way back up and we'll finish up the palm tree up here. Here we are. You see that we finished up our design. I started first by adding the soft drop shadow in the names and also by adding the drop shadow here in the reeds. What this simply is a soft dagger stroke that I built off of this black area to give it the illusion of a light source coming in from this area. You can see our light source here. Also, this light source has affected the lighting in the water. You can see that we've got a little bit of wave action here in the water. And I've also got a reflection straight down the center. This is real effective in determining this light source and the direction that it's going. Moving up the design, we've got our highlighting in our lettering as well, keeping it real crisp. And just a little shot here in the upper left corner. It's kind of like a shooting star coming across. I think it adds a nice touch to it. This design will run about $20, $25, again, depending on where you are. You've got to have this design up in your display. My shops are up in an area where winter is the predominant season year-round, and I still sell tons of these designs. I think people are just in love with the allure of the tropical scene, and it kind of, whatever, reminds them of vacation or just kind of relaxing. So you've got to make sure you've got it in there. So, great addition. Well, that brings us to the end of the first part of the two-part series of Kent Lind's Top 25 Designs. Hope you learned something, had a little fun, and we'll see you in part 2.